covering emerging technology and infrastructure, so everything from storage and there we go. How's that? Better? Storage and networking all the way through to virtualization, and in the last 5 years or so in the cloud computing space. I'm responsible for our cloud and big data practice at the research arm of Big Arm. So just briefly on the agenda here, we'll kind of race through the first half of it. We've gone into a lot more detail on Hadoop already, so I won't go over that. But I want to look at kind of what comes on top of the platform once you guys are familiar with Hadoop. You know, what can you really do with it? What's happening a little bit in the NoSQL space? Some emerging trends and questions to consider if you're on the customer side or if you're investment. So how big? You know, we're talking about big data. Everybody asks me all the time, you know, how much data do I have to have for it to really qualify as big data? Well, you know, the question is, when does your data sort of get uncomfortable to deal with? That's when you have a large amount of data. But, you know, we look at the web scale companies, and their technology always ends up leading into the enterprise. So Facebook hit 1 billion users on their application in October this year. Pretty impressive. And, you know, they have to build technology to deal with that amount of data, right? That doesn't necessarily exist in the commercial marketplace. So Facebook has to build things itself to analyze what its customers, what its users are doing with its application. Similarly at Twitter, these guys, 400 million tweets a day. This is also a really interesting big data company because their data is growing exponentially. And I think it's actually a really interesting data repository too in terms of analysis of big data. You know, we kind of think of Twitter as this, you know, mostly innocuous thing, but, you know, increasingly people are looking at doing sentiment analysis on financial markets, on, you know, riots in war-torn regions, which we never would have thought Twitter would be useful in the past. And I think that that repository of data is just kind of at the start in terms of what we're going to be able to do with that information. Machine-generated data is growing at a phenomenal rate. So we kind of think of data as the stuff that we sit around, you know, punching into machines all day, but actually it's the stuff that's happening between machines, sensors, RFID, all the network events that are happening. That's growing at a phenomenal rate too. And then overall, we're looking at like almost 8 exabytes of data by 2015. So 1 exabyte is 1 billion gigabytes. So it's now reaching the kind of numbers where I think, at least for me, it's actually hard to comprehend how much data and how much information that is. It's just vast. And the enterprise too, so, you know, we look at all these, you know, Facebook and Google and Twitter and these companies, but I think the enterprise has a phenomenal amount of data too, and is struggling with both the internal and the external sources of data, and basically the relentless rate at which it's coming in, and the increasing number of sources at which it's coming in. And it's making it very hard to get your head around it, essentially. And I think any kind of business analyst, decision maker is dealing with this sort of huge number of sources and variety of data, volume, all of these things. And accessing is difficult. So, you know, what can we do about it? Well, we could turn some computers off, which I don't think that's going to happen. We could try to decide what to store. You know, for years there's been this idea of, you know, doing classification of data and having all these layers of different kinds of archives. And, you know, it takes such a long time to create a classification system. By the time you've finished creating that classification system for your data, you've got new forms of data that no longer fit into that classification system. And then you have to start again with a whole new, you know, process. And so I think any type of, you know, any type of classification just gets really hard, and stemming the tide of big data is not going to work. So I think those things are key. So, you know, a couple of new technologies have come along in, as we know, Hadoop and NoSQL. And, you know, right now these are sort of, you know, the history of them is in the open source community. And they're being hardened now. They're being commercialized and they're being hardened for the enterprise. I think that's really important. And, you we've mentioned Linux here today as an example. I think what Red Hat did with Linux is a good analogy with what's happening in the Hadoop platform space. The technology has now got wrappers around it for management and security and all these things that are important to the enterprise. And there's a few companies. We know Cloudera is in this space. Hortonworks kind of following on its coattails. Mapr is in this space too. There's companies that have packaged up open source NoSQL databases. 10gen is behind MongoDB. DataStax is behind Cassandra. So there's serious companies out there now that have made this technology viable for traditional businesses. This space, though, by the way, if there are any investors in the audience, this infrastructure space of big data is heavily funded already. So if you're looking at investment opportunities, this is kind of done, this platform layer. There's probably 20 companies alone in the NoSQL market. There's another 10 in the NewSQL space. So the sort of renaissance that's happened in the database market is already heavily funded, and there's a lot of companies to look for there. I think where the action is going to be in the next few years is going to be in the applications on top of this platform. I guess this is a little bit of an inside joke, but as you guys now know, Hadoop is the elephant, so really you want to be able to kind of drive this elephant where you want to go. So I think, the application space is going to be very important. And we're already seeing a lot of companies here get funded in different areas of the market. So in operational intelligence, Splunk has a market cap on the public this year of around $3 billion. And this company basically takes machine log files and produces the analysis on top to see what's happening in your IT networks, basically. Sumo Logic has come behind them, offers a cloud-based version of this. So this is a great example of a big data application, again, on top of the Hadoop platform, so really making use of the actual data that you've aggregated. Sales and marketing is a huge opportunity for big data apps. Good Data is an interesting company here. So marketing people have to pull data from campaigns, from Google and Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of different sources and aggregate and analyze that data. It's a complex process. Good Data essentially pulls all that together for you in one place and helps you do that analysis on top of the data. We talked a little bit about visualization. I think that's going to be a huge area in big data applications in the coming years. Mainly because I think data is kind of being democratized and people want their slice of data in the way that they want to be able to manipulate and view it. So I think the visualization tools are really important. BI we've touched on too. Cloudera essentially takes sort of Hadoop data sets and turns them into really interesting visualizations. They have very cool kind of drill down capabilities. Domo and Wikidata are sort of following in their coattails as well. Online advertising, is sort of the one that everybody talks about in terms of optimizing ad networks. Minority Report, Styly, kind of following you around. Lots of companies in that space. And then I think, the coming years, data as a service is going to be really interesting too. So FICO collects financial data sets and sells those to companies and does sort of analysis on top of financial data. DataSwift collects Twitter data and does sort of sentiment analysis for you on certain kinds of Twitter data. So, it's about the applications. I think that's going to be really key. And then looking forward over the next few years, basically I just see kind of more and